Hello, good evening. Welcome to Prime Business with me, Pius Kojobaka. To our very first story, Deputy Ranking Member on the Finance Committee of Parliament, Isaac Adongo, has criticized the Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Ernest Addison, for failing to file financial statements of banks for almost 6 months now. Now, the MP says the law mandates the central bank to gazette its assets and liabilities every 15 days. Addressing the media, Isaac Adongo says the committee will drag the governor before Parliament for failing to file the statements.
We have been waiting to receive the gazetting and the publication of the Bank of Ghana's own financial statements, which by law should have been published by the end of April of the year. We are now half a year through the year, and all the banks have complied with the filing of their returns to the Bank of Ghana. Those reports include what we call the long-form reports, which are very detailed, audited reports of the banks, breaking down every single item on the balance sheet of the banks in order that we can see the bank for who it is. But Bank of Ghana is not able to comply with its own law to do the very things that the other banks are doing. The bank has not filed and published its financial statements. Every 15 days, the Bank of Ghana is supposed to gazette its assets and liabilities. And at the end of the month, they are supposed to further file its assets and liabilities. It's been almost 6 months now. The Bank of Ghana is in clear violations of these provisions. You would have noticed that over the last 2-3 years, the Bank of Ghana has been running away from the Finance Committee of Parliament. We have been inviting him to appear before us and speak to his report. Initially, I had to write letters to him and get my lawyers to warn him before he started filing his reports. Having filed the reports, he is not willing to appear before us. We will engage the Speaker to subpoena the Governor to appear before us, and that there's no hiding place for him. He cannot be recklessly managing our monetary and financial institutions, collapse our banks and financial institutions, render our livelihood useless with inflation, interest rate, and depreciation, and do not want to account for those matters.
All right, so it is important we hear from the Bank of Ghana. Joining me via phone is Director of Research at the Central Bank, Philip Abredu-Otu. Philip Abredu-Otu, good you could join me on Prime Business. Now, why has the Bank of Ghana failed to file its financial accounts?
To you, good evening to listeners, and thank you very much for this opportunity. So I was listening to the statement by the ranking member, and I think there is something instructive that he said. And I think he said that the banks have filed their financial position. You recall that the banks also did that by seeking a reprieve from the Bank of Ghana. All banks are supposed to do that by the end of the first quarter, but because of the impact of the domestic debt exchange on the balance sheet of the banks wrote to the central bank to ask for an extension of the deadline to allow the external auditors to do a more thorough job. We understood the issues at stake, and the central bank granted the banks that reprieve to allow them to work with the auditors diligently to get the accounts published. So we extended the time for the publication to the end of April, by which time all the banks complied and they published their accounts. So for the banks, it was extended. Now, so I'm just trying to put it in context. In the case of the Bank of Ghana, we also were affected by the domestic debt exchange, and our external auditors requested that they needed more time to do a more thorough job. So the Bank of Ghana wrote to the Finance Minister, who we report to ask for an extension of that deadline to the end of July. But I think you will recall that if you look at Section 58(1)(b) of the law, of the Bank of Ghana Act 2002, it requires the Bank of Ghana to submit to the Finance Minister.
Rather unfortunate, it seems we've lost Philip Abredu Otu, and pretty soon we shall connect back to him to speak to the issues, basically what the minority is raising about the Bank of Ghana's failure to present financial results or reports to the House. And the Isaac Adongo, member of the Finance Committee, has hinted of, ensuring that the governor is brought before Parliament to answer questions. Of course, we shall keep an eye on that and keep our viewers updated. As and when we get Philip back, we shall bring him on to conclude his point. But we've got to stay a while longer with the central bank because they have assured savings and loans companies across the country of putting up measures to address issues of non-performing loans and high interest. According to the central bank, it has observed the challenge facing players in the sector. Now, speaking on behalf of the governor, head of banking supervision at the Bank of Ghana, Sheikh Jesse urged members of the sector to comply with regulatory standards as central banks continue with its effort in ensuring financial stability. He spoke at the 13th annual general meeting of the Ghana Savings and Loans Companies.
Mr. Chairman, indeed, ensuring regulatory compliance and maintaining sound risk management practices are crucial to the survival of any deposit-taking institution, including SNLs. In this regard, the bank recognizes the association's ongoing efforts to ensure compliance with regulatory standards and will urge all SNLs to aim at full compliance. Mr. Chairman, touching on engendering sound risk management practices, the Bank of Ghana has observed with concern some increases in non-performing loans, NPLs, and increases in funding costs, which may sooner than later threaten the safety and stability of the subsector. It is imperative that prompt corrective actions are put in place to curb the rising trends in NPLs and also to diversify funding sources to enhance profitability and foster customer confidence. Mr. Chairman, despite the challenges faced by the SNL subsector, it is expected that regulatory reliefs coupled with strict regulations and supervision will help maintain stability over the short term to medium term.
All right, so I'm told Philip Abredu is back on to conclude his point. But Philip, before you make that point, you were telling us about the steps you are taking to correct this challenge. But based on your explanation, what more are you doing?
So based on the explanation, what is still going on? Our reporting obligation is to the Minister of Finance, and recognizing this fact, we have informed the Finance Minister on 23rd of June. We did inform the Finance Minister to explain the challenges that the external auditors were facing due to the domestic debt exchange and the delays in the publication of the account. The board is taking steps to publish. The Finance Minister granted a reprieve to the end of July. The board is working hard to ensure that we meet that deadline. And as we speak, what is going on with the auditors to get this published as quickly as possible.
Great. So this information you're relaying has already been given to the committee, right?
No, so this information is in the domain of the Minister of Finance. So we have informed the Minister of the inability of the external auditors to finish their work on time. I think the Finance Minister at the appropriate time will relay this information to Parliament. But it is in the domain of the finance. And if you take note, the law, and that is what I was talking about, Section 58(1)(b) of the Bank of Ghana Act requires us to report to the Finance Minister, to whom we have sought reprieve to allow the auditors to do a more thorough job on our balance sheet.
All right. Thank you very much, Philip Abredu-Otu, for that clarification. He's the head of research at the Bank of Ghana. I remind that you're still watching Prime Business with me, Pius Kojo Baka. To some other stories, economist Professor Lord Mensah is calling for a major review in Ghana's fiscal targets following the $3 billion IMF deal and the recalibration of taxes in the mid-year budget review. Government is expected to present the mid-year review of budget estimates on Tuesday, July 25. Already pressure is being mounted on government to use the mid-year budget to scrap some taxes deemed to have outlived its purpose, like the COVID-19 levy. Now, speaking to Joy Business ahead of the presentation, Professor Mensah urged government to present a moderate expenditure for the next half of the year.
If you look at the 2023 budget, relative to what is happening on the grounds, clearly you come to understand that the budget is way completely deviated from what exactly is happening on the ground. So I'm expecting a major review, and also looking at the financing sources being quite limited now. If you look, the various sources of finance. Now we're looking at taxes and then possibly short-term financing. The long-term financing is no more, and then also being, hold up at the Eurobond market. I'm expecting that, at least we'll limit our, expenditure on the capital, investment, because as we speak now, government can only raise money on short-term basis, and you can't use short-term, funds for long-term investment. So I'm expecting major review, and a review that will reflect, the IMF. Where are they going to get the money from? I don't think there's some money available anywhere apart from treasury bills. The bonds that we restructured, the market for it is quite, low. And so looking at how the investor confidence has, reduced, and the horizon of the investor has reduced to short term, I'm expecting that government will stick to that and then look at how we can survive recurrently, and then possibly think about, long term in the next budget or the next 2 years budget. So from where I sit, I don't expect any review that will call for extra expenditure, but rather probably on the revenue side, it is expected that there'll be some recalibrations. There are some agitations and calls that the COVID levy should be removed, and I foresee that it will be recalibrated to another, form of tax. So, because government needs money as we speak now.
A while longer on the media budget review, and more business associations have appealed to government to seize the opportunity to reduce high taxes affecting private sector growth. The latest to join the call is the Chamber of Young Entrepreneurs, which has called for a reduction in taxes. Speaking to Joy Business ahead of the media budget review, Chief Executive of the Young Entrepreneurs, Sharif Gali, explained that many SMEs have struggled to stay afloat after the upward review of some taxes in the 2023 fiscal year.
Market, go to the SMEs run. How many of them are even scaling up with all the support we are giving them? So we need to be realistic with all the support. And aside that, I think that going forward, I would want to see a lot of release. I know there are plans to review our taxes because of the IMF agreement. I think that anything that will increase any tax component is going to be a big issue for SMEs. Already we are struggling. And you see, we have little to do when it comes to what government also want to do to meet up their revenue target. But I'm telling you what, Isaac, if we should continue in this tangent, then we will continue to get SMEs that are folding now, because just last VAT increment and a few other things that were announced, other SMEs have been, they have closed because they can't operate in such a ecosystem. So going forward, I want to beg. I know our review, there will not be anything new, anything surprising to the ecosystem, but if there is, the business community would be in a very tough situation at this moment.
Away from budget review, government statistician Professor Samuel Kobnenim has challenged policymakers to take a critical look at factors contributing to the increase of food inflation. Food inflation has consistently seen an increase of 20 percentage points compared to non-food inflation. Now, speaking to journalists after announcing the inflation for June, which increased marginally to 42.5% compared to 42.2% in May, Professor Enim said that prices of common staples such as vegetables continue to record an increase over the period. Here is more. According to the Ghana Statistical Service, food inflation remains high at 54.2%, higher than the national average, with imported products increasing by 43.8%, while locally produced items saw a rate of 36.2%. Prices of vegetables such as tomatoes saw an increase in average prices. Professor Samwokobnenim is government statistician.
We keep on recording a widening of the gap between food and non-food inflation in the last 3 months. On a month-on-month basis, we also record a 1.3 percentage point between food inflation and non-food inflation, with food inflation June 2023 standing at 3.9% and non-food inflation month-on-month 2.6%. We continue to see the dominance of imported items in the consumer price index and rate of inflation. Imported items for the month of June 2023 stood at 44.5% relative to locally produced items 35.9%, indicating about a 9.0 percentage point difference between imported items and locally produced items.
Reacting to the development, senior finance lecturer at the University of Cape Coast, Seram Kawo, blamed the phenomenon on demand and supply, arguing there must be a concerted effort in addressing the rising food inflation.
There is demand for food, and once there is demand and supply is low, the prices of the food will be very high. What do we do to ensure that we have these things available from time to time? That is where government policies come in, to ensure that the food that we need in the country are provided through the agricultural system. The Ministry of Agriculture, the various centers that are responsible for the growing and manufacturing of food items have to come together to put up a policy. Over time, when this is not done, we are going to struggle.
He however warned that if this trend continues, it could have serious implications for the central bank in controlling inflation.
If we continue to talk the way we do, it's going to affect everything in the country. We need actions than words. If we don't put into place various actions to ensure that the right things are done, we are going to stay where we are. And so we need government to act immediately on some of these concerns. And government needs to be proactive, not reactive to issues.
Meanwhile, Northeast region recorded the highest rate of food inflation with a figure of 79%, while the Ahafo region recorded the lowest rate of 40.9%. On the back of this inflation story, General Agricultural Workers Union says it is alarmed at the neglect of the fisheries sector, leading to high cost of fish products on the market. The concern was raised after government statistician pointed out that the fish component in food inflation keeps rising, contributing significantly to the overall inflation. Reacting to the issue, the General Secretary of GAWU, Edward Kariwe, said even though there are viable policies on paper to revamp the fisheries sector, it is yet to be implemented.
The fundamentals of agriculture is being touched now. So sometimes when we are talking about agriculture, we need to talk with it with passion. If you look at the massive destruction that is being done for agriculture today, in the next 5 years, 10 years, if we are not able to abate the rate at which the destruction is going, of course, there will virtually not be agriculture, and our problems will be exacerbated. So, for me, I think that we are really not doing the things that we need to do. The fundamentals of agriculture is seriously touched in this country, is destroyed in this country. Fish, generally, as is produced in Ghana, is produced coming from the natural sources, from rivers, from the sea, and so on. That is how we get our fish. Even though we are now making efforts to have fish ponds where we can deliberately breed fish for ourselves, that has not yet caught up with us. And if you see the level of destruction that we have done to our rivers, though if you take the cumulative effect, you will see that the opportunity for fish production has been drastically curtailed by this effect. You know, all our rivers, except a major few of them who still have marine life, who still have aquatic life existence. Most of them have been, they are just dead. And so you can't get fish from all those ones. So cumulatively, it has a serious effect on our fish production. And it's not surprising for me that we are having fish production declining.